Hi everyone, it's Nicole for Simon Says STAMPtember. Today I am sharing a card with the Altenew exclusive limited edition stamp set called Dainty Sprig. There are also coordinating dies available if you want to be able to die cut this beautiful floral design from the stamp set. You can also use the layering stamps included in the set to stamp with some of your favorite dye or pigment inks and layer those. If you don't want to color in the images, you can use just the outline for maybe alcohol lift or other kinds of techniques. You can watercolor, Copic color, colored pencils, so many things you can do with this awesome stamp set. I'm going to use the stamp and stamp it all over a piece of A2 sized Bristol Smooth cardstock using a clear embossing ink and embossing with the Simon Says Stamp Antique Gold Embossing Powder for a kind of elegant, thankful for your friendship card is what this is going to turn out to be. Creating an all-over background pattern design with this floral. I stamped it a couple times and then I decided it was a little hard to see and I want to make sure that I don't overlap anything. So I'm going to sprinkle on my embossing powder as I go, but I'm not actually going to heat set anything until I have it pretty well covered, I think, here. And I'm just flipping it and turning it, adding my stamping, sprinkling on my embossing powder. I did not get a very good impression in this bottom lower corner, and normally that would kind of be a big bummer because I am not using a stamp positioner. I did, however, line it back up and just stamp that down, and I was able to get the impression, so I was able to save that, which I was super grateful about, and I didn't have to start over. I did decide at this point I probably better go ahead and heat set what I already have done. So I made sure my heat tool was good and hot, and then I took it to my paper, embossing with that antique gold embossing powder. And then I will fill in the remaining little area there in that bottom corner. In fact, I just went ahead and added another layer of the powder tool to help keep the embossing powder from migrating. And it really looks like I've got another little section that on an edge that needs something. I want to make sure it's really nice and full, so I added in a couple more leaves. I'm ready to start watercoloring with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I'm really excited today to use a couple of new colors. I'm using pale orange and vanilla with bright yellow to soften up these florals. This is a really soft background today, nothing harsh at all about this. And I love the way these work together. The newer Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers are mostly all very light pale shades, like pale orange, pale yellow, which I'm using both of those today, and other pale colors which work beautifully with the markers you maybe already have to lighten them up a little. I am starting with my dark color in the center, then my medium tone, and blending out with the lightest vanilla color, and even going in with a water brush pen and blending out to get a little bit more of that watercolored look. The leaves are all light green and pale green. And my flowers are all going to be a combination of the bright yellow, pale orange, and vanilla. And the center of my flowers are all going to be pale yellow. I wanted to really keep this light and very soft and pretty today. Trying something a little bit different, not my usual bright color. There's still a lot of color here. It's just not the really bright, vibrant, and I think it works really beautifully with the gold embossing. It showcases that, especially when you tip your paper at an angle a little bit, and once we add our gold embossed paper strip and some vellum leaves, it just really adds to a beautiful, elegant feel for this card. I decided I better kind of work in a smaller area at a time so I don't miss anything, hopefully. And so once I kind of had this bottom area colored, I did trace around my images very, very lightly with the green shadow marker, and then I'm blending it out with the water brush pen. If at any time that doesn't work very well, you can always use, I'm using my glass mat. It works as a palette, but you could also use an acrylic block if you don't have a glass mat. Scribble your marker on that and then pick up the color with a paintbrush or water brush pen and paint around your images. I kind of did a combination, and I really felt like just coloring it directly on the paper and blending it out worked the best for this card with this particular color. So I went ahead and kind of just traced around it, all the little sections, and then would blend out as I went with that green shadow marker. This allowed part of it kind of to dry while I worked on the rest. It dried really quickly. But that green shadow adds such a lovely hint of color to the background and really dresses it up, leaving it, I don't normally like to leave it just plain white. For whatever reason, when I'm doing these watercolors, I just like that little wash of color, and I tend to gravitate more towards lighter colors most of the time, not always. But this is a really fun one. I like that green shadow. I like it with these colors. I like it with the gold embossing powder, and it ended up working out really well. So we've just got a few more images to color, and then the rest of that background to add color to. Whole bunch of leaves here. It looks like I got the flowers pretty well colored. Maybe missed a little area here and there. I'll go back and fill in. Add the color to the leaves. I did not watercolor all of the leaves. Especially if they were rather small, I would not add water to them. But the bigger ones I tended to go ahead and blend out with my water brush pen. And then very, very messily, and I generally recommend using or working in a small area, not outlining the whole thing. That way the ink doesn't have a really good chance to dry and absorb into the paper too much. So kind of work in small areas and then work your way out, blend as you go, and you're going to get a really awesome effect. Once I have this done, it's time to grab and finish up those finishing details. In this case, I am going to die cut one of my favorite dies. It is not a new die. It is something I've had for quite a while from Simon Says Stamp. It's the Clustered Leaves die. And I die cut that from vellum. And then I'm going to stamp one of the sentiments from the Dainty Sprig stamp set on smooth white cardstock using clear embossing ink. Sprinkle on, again, that antique gold embossing powder and emboss that. And then use the brand new sentiment labels from the Simon Says STAMPtember release. I'm going to pick the one that fits this greeting, die cut that into a strip, and then we can put the card together and add the finishing details. These sentiment labels are awesome if you don't want to try to guess how to trim your paper into a perfect strip, or maybe you don't stamp it perfectly straight, which is what happens to me a lot. I can line up a die a lot easier, so that is able to get a perfectly straight greeting. I'm going to layer the clustered leaves kind of at a diagonal throughout the card, tuck my greeting strip into that, and then trim off all of the excess. So let's attach our clustered leaves first. Vellum is always one of my very favorite things to add if I want a great layer, but I really don't want it to cover up completely what's going on in the background, which in the background of this card, the Dainty Sprig is the star of the show. That beautiful background is what I want to showcase. So I added a little glue just kind of where I'm going to actually be covering up, so you won't see that glue through the vellum, and then I'm going to glue my strip in place, letting some of the leaves and stuff go over the top of that for a little bit more natural feel. Once I have that adhered, I'm simply going to flip my panel over and trim off all of the excess. And I like my long shears for this. I think they work the best. And I need to trim off the leaves as well as my sentiment label that's a little too long for my panel. And I want to do this on all 4 sides so that this fits the front of my card base perfectly. And I did not secure the clustered leaves anywhere else. It's going to lay pretty nicely. Finally, I'm going to finish with a scattering of Nuvo crystal drops in pale gold and morning dew throughout my card design. The pale gold picks up the gold from the embossing, and the morning dew looks like dewdrops. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for this STAMPtember exclusive Altenew limited edition stamp set Dainty Sprig. The supplies I used to create this card are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.